G'day guys, how's it going? Now, whilst previously Samsung have always stayed tried and true to their mentality that plastic is better and, it's all about what's inside the phone, Samsung completely rebranded their phone line with the release of the Samsung Galaxy S6 and S6 Edge earlier this year. Not only is this phone hands down the best Samsung Galaxy S device up to this point by leaps and bounds, it's actually probably one of the best smartphones full stop. Despite the newfound attention given to the appearance of the S6 and S6 Edge, Samsung have kept impressing with their internals too. This phone runs on their own Exynos 7420 chipset and packs a whopping 3GB of RAM to make this phone one of the most buttery smooth devices I've ever used. You can get this phone with up to 128GB of internal storage, but unlike all of their previous flagship devices, the SG6 and SG6 Edge do not offer expandable storage. This is a deal breaker for a lot of people for a lot of reasons, and it was a pretty big call on Samsung's part to remove the feature completely. It was almost a deal breaker for me when considering this phone as a purchase, but I've got to say, even with the 32GB option, it's ample amount of space for me. And I've got to say, the reason why there is no micro SD card slot is a pretty good one: the design. A unibody phone with a metal frame and glass back and front gives the SG6 the premium look and feel people have been yearning for each year Samsung have released their flagship. Finally, Samsung have a phone that people are comfortable to call the best smartphone. The phone comes in 4 different colours: white pearl, gold platinum, blue topaz, and this colour here, black sapphire. You've probably heard it before, but I just love the way the black sapphire gives off a dark blue shimmer when in the sun. It looks absolutely incredible. The slightly brushed metal frame of the SG6 really has a premium feel in the hand, and it looks great too. The buttons are the reasonably standard layout: volume on the left, power on the right, though they've lowered the position of the power button somewhat whilst keeping the volume rockers in their same positions. I like the lowering of the power button as it makes it more one-handed friendly, but I think that they should have also lowered the volume rockers. Aside from that, they're super tactile and clicky, and they just add to the premium feeling of the phone. This really is a nice phone to hold in the hand. It's nice and thin, 6.8mm thick, and the combination of the metal sides along with the glass front and back make this one of the most beautiful phones to look at. On the front of the phone, we have the standard Samsung home button that feels really nice and tactile to press. In fact, it actually feels a lot nicer to press than any previous Samsung Galaxy phone. The home button also houses the fingerprint sensor, which is a massive leap in improvement from the S5. Not only do you not have to do that annoying swipe of the home button to get a read, but it's way more responsive and sensitive to the finger. I mean, there are still times when it misreads my finger and I have to try again, but to be fair, it's usually when I'm rushing and I've placed like a quarter of my thumb on the sensor, so it's probably more my fault than the sensors. I would also say that this fingerprint sensor is as good, maybe if not better, than the Touch ID on the iPhones, which is saying a lot. It's also worth mentioning that the home button, when double tapped, acts as a quick shortcut to the camera app, which is lightning fast, great for capturing moments in a flash. Either side of the home button, we have the usual capacitive touch multitasking and back keys, and as usual, they light up for a second or two when you touch them. Up the top of the front, we have a couple of sensors, as well as the ear speaker, 5-megapixel front-facing camera, the notification LED, and the Samsung logo. Pretty standard stuff. On the bottom of the phone, we have the headphone jack, micro USB port, and the loudspeaker, which I will touch on more later. The top is pretty minimal, with a secondary microphone and the IR blaster for using your phone as a remote control. And on the back of the phone, we have a whopping 16 megapixels rear-facing camera, LED flash, and the heart rate sensor. Not only have they picked up their game in a big way here, Samsung, they've pretty much actually knocked it out of the park. The only real negative that I can come up with is that because of the more premium materials that they've used for the design, this phone's become a lot more precious. So the day that I drop it is going to be a sad day. And I'm going to suggest that you're going to have to buy yourself a case if you're going to be able to walk around without worrying that this thing's going to fall into the ground. But you know what? I think that's a pretty small price to pay because this design is incredible. The only other real issue with this design is that this phone is a fingerprint magnet. You might want to be prepared to be constantly wiping your phone down, as the glass on the back in particular is not forgiving to the touch of your fingers. We now move on to the screen itself, and I have to say this screen is absolutely incredible. You hear people talk about resolutions and types of screens, pixel densities and so on, and normally I think, look, I probably can't really tell the difference. Let me tell you, actually using the S6, which is a Super AMOLED 5.1-inch Quad HD display at 1440 by 2560 pixels, you absolutely through and through can tell. Everything is so clear and the colours are vibrant and rich, it just feels the way a smartphone screen should be. One of the main issues with AMOLED displays in the past has been when using them outside. Usually they just don't perform that well in bright light. And often I've found myself, maxing out the brightness slider, and then a couple of minutes later I'll come back and I'll just check, making sure that I have actually maxed it out, because I can't even really see the display. The S6 screen with the Super AMOLED display has come a long way to improving that. It's a lot clearer when used in bright light, and no longer am I constantly rechecking the brightness level, thinking there's still room to move. As well as that, the lower end of the brightness slider is super dim as well, which is great for when you're using it, in bed, in a dark room. Try not to wake the person next to you, or just try not to blind your own eyes out, because let's face it, we do use our phones a lot in bed. So whether or not that's a good thing, that's a great feature of this phone. That takes us to the software. Samsung has continued to persist with TouchWiz, although with the S6 they've definitely made some big improvements. Often in the past, people have complained that the TouchWiz skin Samsung use has been clunky and has resulted in slowing phones down. Samsung has improved that at the very least, and the performance of this phone, like I said earlier, is buttery smooth. Opening the camera is lightning fast, probably the fastest I've ever seen. Multitasking is borderline flawless, which often isn't the case, and opening and closing apps has never been faster on a Samsung Galaxy device. Now, in saying all this, the phone is still very TouchWiz. It just has that look and feel about it. And if you've ever used stock Android or CyanogenMod 12 before, you'll just know it's not as nice to look at or navigate around. I definitely miss the quick settings found for the different toggles in the notification center. In saying that, Samsung have kind of made it possible to make your phone look a little less like TouchWiz, using things like the theme store or a custom launcher. And actually, I will be touching on that in a later video, so stay tuned for that. But I don't think that TouchWiz is a major drawback as it maybe once was. One of the major complaints people have had with the SG6 devices has been the battery life. In order to compensate for the new unibody metal design and to maintain a slim device, Samsung had to reduce the battery size down from the 2800 mAh battery that the S5 housed, and the S6 itself holds a 2550 mAh battery, and departing from the norm of Galaxy devices, the battery is now non-removable. People have questioned Samsung's decision to not only reduce the battery size, but also make it non-removable as well. In the past, people have been able to carry around a spare battery in case of emergency, but that is no longer an option. For a lot of people, this has been a deal breaker. In regards to the actual life of the battery, in contrast to a lot of people, I've actually found it to be above standard. Now, I don't mean to say that this thing's going to start lasting you 2 days, but with regular usage, which includes a bit of web browsing, social media surfing, making a few phone calls, sending plenty of text messages, a few videos, among other things, you should get through the day with a little to spare. I think for me, my expectations of the S6's battery life were so low that there was only room for me to be pleasantly surprised. I mean, you consider the speed of this phone, the heavy skin of TouchWiz, and the Quad HD Super AMOLED screen, and you're almost asking for a fast-draining battery. But this is not a fast-draining battery phone. Sure, there are plenty of phones out there that have much greater battery life than the S6, and it certainly isn't a high point of the phone, but for me, the battery life has been satisfactory. Definitely not outstanding, but fine for day-to-day use. There are also two reasons why this shouldn't be a major issue for you. One is wireless charging, and the second is adaptive fast charging. Now, admittedly, wireless charging is probably more of a fun novelty at this point as opposed to being a super beneficial feature. But buying a few of these wireless charging pads is cheap as chips, so you can just have a couple around the home, one at work, and the convenience of just placing your phone down and it starts charging is pretty cool, and certainly reduces the fear of having a dead battery before the end of the day. But the biggest redeeming factor is the adaptive fast charging. Now, I know numbers can vary for this, but just today I plugged my phone in at 28%, and 15 minutes later it was on 56%. Which is an 18% jump. But then another 15 minutes later, it had jumped up to 82%, nearly another 30% increase. So if you've had a heavy day of phone usage and your battery is either very low or dead, and you're in a position to plug your phone in for 15 to 30 minutes, you could give yourself another 50% in quick time. To me, that's a pretty handy compensation for a smaller battery. Now, before we have a look at the lofty standards of the S6 camera, I just wanted to take a real quick moment to talk about the vibration intensity and the audio quality of the S6. Now, it's not often something that we talk about, vibration intensity of a phone, and often I found myself owning a phone that just sits in your pocket and the vibration level is just so low that I'll be missing calls and notifications, and I think that this is a pretty big issue. So I want to assure you that the vibration intensity on the S6 is one of the loudest that I've come across in any smartphone, and that's probably massively due to the metal design, but there's been a couple of occasions where I've actually kind of been a bit startled at the vibration, but I think that's a good thing. You know, we buy phones and we want them to tell us when we're getting notifications. So vibration intensity is great, and to prove it, check this video out. The other thing I wanted to talk about real quick is audio quality, both ear speaker and loudspeaker. Call quality on the S6 is pretty close to excellent. The person's voice on the other end of the line is full of clarity. It's loud, which is probably the most important thing. And when you're on loudspeaker mode, there's this cool option where you can hit boost audio, and it just gives you a little extra volume for when you're in the car or some sort of extra loud space. And for general audio use as well, such as music or video, the S6's speaker is decent. So have a look at this video. So last but far from least, the camera. The Samsung Galaxy S6 packs a whopping 16 megapixel sensor rear-facing camera with optical image stabilization and 4K video recording, among plenty of other things, and boy does it perform. In my opinion, the camera on the S6 is the best camera you can get on a smartphone today, on par, if not better, than the iPhone 6. The camera is crazy fast at taking a snap, the autofocus is super quick and accurate, the photos are rich in color and crisp, and the overall photo taking experience is easy and fast. Exactly what most of us want in a smartphone camera. Taking a look at some of the photos that I took, you can see all the photos are sharp, you can get DSLR-like depth of field, and the colors are punchy and well saturated. And just to let you know, all of these photos that I've taken here were on auto mode and just a quick open and snap. So there was no, extended setting up of the camera or using the menu to change any ISO or anything like that. It was just all quick open, take a snap. So without a doubt, the perfect smartphone camera. Video-wise, this beast of a camera shoots up to 4K video, which is absolute top of the range. And the image stabilizer does a decent job as well. You can see a few videos I shot here, and you can see the colors are rich and vivid, and the image quality is sharp and crisp. And to focus, it's quick and responsive. On the front side, we have a 5 megapixel front-facing camera, and it's perfectly adequate for taking selfie photos. So as you may or may not be able to tell, I'm quite impressed with the Samsung Galaxy S6. You know, everything from the design to the internals to this whopping camera on the back make this one of the best smartphones of 2015, and I would go as far as to say that it's probably my favorite that I've ever used. And that's saying a lot because I've come from iPhones and I've used a lot of Androids, so that says a lot. And you know what, it's cool because it shows that Samsung are kind of happy to put their hand up and say, hey, we still matter in this smartphone world. Now, would I recommend anyone to buying it? The answer is yes. The only thing is that it is expensive. So this isn't a cheap phone. It is on the higher end of the scale of phones, but you know what? I think you do get what you pay for. As you do with the iPhones, you get awesome internals, and you know, with this phone, it's future-proofed as well. It's got technologies in it that I haven't even talked about that mean that it's still going to be relevant in years to come. So great phone, great job Samsung, impressed. Now, that's it for this video, and I appreciate you watching. I hope you enjoyed it. You know, this is something new for me and something that I hope to continue doing. So if you liked it, hit like. If you liked it even more than that, hit subscribe. That'd be awesome, and I will see you in the next video.